Hello everyone, my name is Marcus Posse and I had to do the re-recording of the release of the book All About Resources, which was on June 25th, because for some reason the microphones were not captured, neither the ones in the system, nor the ones I used, probably because I didn't. I adjusted it right, but the idea is to explain to you, within the dynamics of the images that were used at the time, what was said. I started talking about the author's story, which is me. I've been working directly with contract and project management for more than 25 years, maybe a little more, before I worked directly in production, but then I started to manage things, not only execution but also planning, and then I started to manage things, not only execution but also planning. Over time I came across several needs and various tools, and various technologies, methodologies and management ideas. This book brings together the knowledge I've been able to collect about resources, and I have to say that the theme of the book is resources. What features? Resources are the necessary inputs, the means necessary for the production of labor in the activity. In order not to confuse words, because resource is a word that has a very broad semantics, we will define here that the resources that are addressed by the book, that will be discussed at the launch event and that will be read in the book are the resources that are made available for you to use. The activity is carried out, and we are going to present within the material basically a classification that has two elements, ordinary appeals and extraordinary resources. The name is somewhat different, I was even called attention to it, but what is clear is, ordinary resources are the order of the day, it is what everyone uses, it is what everyone says. And the resources of the extraordinary type are the resources that are not normal, they are not usual, but they exist, and it is because of the knowledge of the types of resources that the book arises so that professionals and students can know what types of resources exist for planning modeling. Of a project and, consequently, to allow the control of this planning, that the monitoring points out trends and the measure of eventual corrections ensures the success of the project. So the book talks about resources and types of resources that make the activity happen, classified as ordinary and extraordinary. We're going to talk about it throughout the launch of the book, which here is an aftermath of what we recover because of what happened and wasn't recorded. There was a moment of discussion on the topic and I started to present a resource that I have used in my works. The physical book, it brings content, but the materials that I have been producing and publishing since 2010, 2009, they bring an interaction, they bring an escape out of the work, and that is presented through these two icons that appear there on the screen. The first icon aims to take the reader to a virtual world, where an artificial intelligence endowed only with curated content, which was curated, which had an endorsement on the subject, tools, techniques, answers questions, including this material is within this support agent, within the OpenAI application. The second icon is the icon of instant communication, Telegram. Of course, Telegram was used because it offers the most interaction, memory, registration, selection, and grouping features. So, these two icons were presented and, then, I drew attention to the fact that my works, my publications, have a very clear copyright. The work can be printed, the work can be copied in parts for citations, studies and illustrations. The copyright of this work and the others that I have produced, they allow printing, portability of the file to any other mobile or fixed device, because today it is ridiculous to work with the premises and customs of the 18th century for publications. I also commented that no one gets rich from selling books, especially technical books. Then I went to the index, made an index, and from the index we commented on what we have in this material. I asked the preface artist and our friend contracopista to introduce themselves in the sense of what they understood from the material that was produced. The impressions they reported, both in the preface and on the back cover, were presented to the group that was present, giving rise to a questioning, a debate, which took place freely right after the pronouncement of each one. The preface artist was Marcio Sperandio Cott, and the cover artist was Peter Mello. Marcio Sperandio is a professional with a lot of experience, a lot of inconsistency. He went through several plans, several projects, several problems, which are more than 400 different cases, which gives him, at least in the experience of observing, to give an understanding of the main challenges and occurrences, and also to give him an understanding of various techniques and tools, quirks and vices that he encountered throughout all his work, which is why he was chosen to write the preface to this book. Peter Mello is already known, he has already published several works, published ideas, but he is practically a scientist, he does not repeat the copy of the copy. In the same way that my materials, my works, are a copy of the copy citing the copy of a document that was copied, there is always the proposal of bringing a new perspective or new content, applicable in the day-to-day work that we have. With you, Marcio Esperanjo Cot, giving your ideas. And now with you, Peter Mello, presenting what he understood and what he developed. Watch what it provokes.
Hello and good evening everyone. Marcus Posse, thank you very much for the invitation. Quite interesting this work that has been done, right? It started with training. There is already a history of books, and there is a lot of interaction with the community. And now all about resources is a very interesting reference that I had the opportunity to write the back cover of, and so I had early access to the book, but I like provocations just like Marcos Post, so I'm not going to talk about the back cover, I'm going to talk about what I would like. Of having also written on the back cover and that, in the book, I missed a little of the argumentation around, but it's a real provocation, which is when we can also treat time as a resource. There are situations in the world of production in which time will be the effect of our productive capacity, available resources, etc. But there are also moments where, due to the availability of time, we are able either to produce more, or to deliver faster, or to generate another result. So, in this way, at certain times, time also works as a resource to be taken advantage of. And in the specific case of Marcus Posse's material, where he talks about the ordinary and the extraordinary, time, then, in these situations, I would say that it will serve for a second volume of this book, because it is also an extraordinary resource, with an inestimable value, because time does not recreate itself. So that mask that time is money doesn't make sense either. We recover money, time doesn't. And then I also want to leave this issue of time as a resource on the agenda so that it can be evaluated at other times. To all of you, a good night of work. I'm in a situation where I'll try to watch the whole performance, but I'm in transit, so I may not be able to be in the final moments, but anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing the recording of this material at the end. Thank you very much and a hug.
In summary, I commented that the book begins, and then the table of contents helps with this. It begins by defining what resources are, so that there is no difficulty in understanding. Resources are everything that is contributed, which can normally be obtained through erasure. Resources are everything that we have available and have control over, which are included in the hall of input so that the activity can be produced. And I also commented that the integration of resources and the registration of resources is a practice that is necessary to provide a minimum acceptable professionalism or technical procedure for us to work with. I commented that we have the ordinary resources. It's the human resources and equipment, the material resources. Material resources are not reusable, but human resources and equipment can be reused during the project. And the cost resource or resource Weber. So the ordinary resources of the day, common, of the natural order, are three kinds. And we say that the market today works, lives on top of these three types, and the book proposes to talk about other types as well. Remembering that I entered the composite resource, it's not the theme of the book, but a composite resource, and I explained, it's that resource that is not just the allocated type, it's the allocated type bringing with it a composition. The example I gave is of the bricklayer. The mason is the resource. The bricklayer, he drinks water, he uses water, he wears protective gear. So the composition says resource mason, but the resource composed leaves the commonplace, the ordinary, simple, and makes it so that when defining mason, I already say that the mason drinks water, uses water for hygiene purposes, wears protective equipment, and when I move, I include work in the activity. Of the mason, it is automatically already accounting for the consumption of materials that are associated with the mason. Of course, as a matter of economic model, all resources and all materials have a cost composition, a cost component. This has already been verified in all the tools that are used in the market, except perhaps for Primavera, which has not located the Weber resource. It's as if, when it comes to producing a work, you define the accomplishment of an activity, you only used people, equipment, and material. There is no talk of support money, of leave, of fees, of permits, there is no talk of money. So going back to the composite mason feature, when we put in composite mason, we've automatically included water. Automatically included PPE consumption. Automatically included the cost of the mason, indirectly the cost of water and the cost of materials. The composite feature, it brings the advantage of modeling object allocation. In the same way, if it were a tractor, the tractor consumes diesel, so tractor is the resource, and in its composition, this tractor being the composite resource, it brings diesel consumed per hour, maintenance elements, costs associated with renting or the work of the tractor, and the material resources that it. Uses, and, finally, when we talk about the cost component, we say that this component permeates even all other ordinary resources. So it was defined in the book and presented that with these three resources we can model a lot of things, but if the support tool cannot model a composite resource, each time you put a resource that depends on or consumes things, a table of consumption and allocate other elements individually and privately to compose a set that, if it were a composite resource, would have a much easier and much more productive modeling. Given a small opening for possible exchanges of ideas, because the composite resource brought a certain debate, I started by calling the attention of the publication, so that there are also registrations of different types, extraordinary resources of a different type, and I called attention to the fact that 3 types are linked to the word Weber. That is, we have 3 types, cost component in the background, looking the same as the first one, money, but it's not the same, it's a richer type. The cost component is not just a value, it has condition. In a richer type, it's a type of resource, it's extraordinary because we don't have this in a common way except Excel. The extraordinary cost shows that the cost component may have attached to its definition a depreciation rate of its value, because money changes over time. The financial plan is different from the economic plan. So in the cost component that is the budget, this type can be enriched with depreciation rates, inflation rates, evolution rates, contractual correction rates.
Rates.
The second type, which is the call center, talks about the classification and grouping of components. It is very common, it is very necessary, so to speak, that the components can be classified or should be classified as investment, operation, expense, mobilized and fixed assets. They have to have classifications that meet the other stakeholders in the project. Of course, the ordinary types can be taken to Excel, then, with a certain amount of work, classify and produce all types of information, but if the tool already has this feature, the speed and integration is full and the speed is immediate and the results are more accurate. Unlike the peerless component, that's exactly what I talked about, the possibility, not of the depreciation rate, but that at specific times the contract defines exchange rate changes, at specific times the currency changes value, because the cost component here it's richer, as I said, and it admits different currencies, in addition to being able to be positive or negative. Usually in the ordinary cost it's just cost. In the budget we allocate, it's just cost, it's just going out. But all ventures need to analyze cash flow, all ventures need to know if the money I spend has a financing support, an annotation. So in these 3 components that we present as types in the book, they are able to represent money, with money coming in, money going out, and those classified by cost centers and changed and modeled by depreciation, inflation, or readjustment rates. Moving on to the other ordinary type, which is materials, other non-reusable resources, we have the second part, materials. What materials? Second part. It's just that the ordinary materials type, it has a complement that enriches the materials. They can be positive and negative, which allows the analysis of the inventory flow, the analysis of the flow of materials, if the materials that I intend to consume exist, because of the entry of materials in the previous period. Or in the period in question, then the type of material resources is now expanded, it's a richer type, it's not an ordinary type. Materials in the period is the same thing, because you can have values, same thing that I say in relation to the period component of the budget. The materials can also have their price, forgetting the variation of the currency or the indexation of the currency that is being used. The material can have variation in its own purchase value, freight, and tax. This is a type of resource that can be used in addition to the ordinary resource. Material centers are the material centers that allow the classification and grouping of materials, and it is not now the accounting that is of interest to the supply team with purchasing or supply control. Material sets is a kit, it's another type of resource. It's not a material, it's a kit, and kit means a set of materials that need to exist in the exact quantity and type to be allocated in the activity. Instead of placing the materials in isolation and multiplying each one by the quantities that would be the composition of a standard kit, we allocate a kit, and when we place a kit, if all the materials do not exist at the same time, the activity cannot happen.
Two.
So it's an important type for modeling. Material assignment is a resource, it is a type of allocation, it is a type of resource that is involving not only the existence but also the form of use. Let's skip that one, the book explains that. And then we have, to finish, 7 complementary resource types. Resource is that resource, manpower or equipment, it is reusable. And once again, resource part 2. The second part of resource is because there are attributes and information that can be put into the resource that enrich its result once modeled. Don't use it, no problem, you won't get answers. But if you use the model, the information it has will bring a richer answer. So, resource, alone, second part, is already a type that adds to the ordinary resource. The resource skill is a different type of resource. Instead of I put boat 1, boat 2, boat 3, I put boat, and I call boat a skill, a profile, call the boat a skill resource, and the skill resource says, when I allocate a boat type skill, the program, the computer, searches for the first available boat, boat. One, 2 boat, or 3 boat, or 4 boat, and put to work. Remembering that boat 1 has a different speed, productivity, capacity than boat 2, which is different from boat 3. So the skill allows me to put, I want a boat, it's kind of a reusable resource. He chooses an available boat from a list, and from this the planning calculates times and costs and productivity and production volumes depending on the chosen boat, that is, chosen or available. It's a very rich resource. And of course, when you have a plan and you have a lot of equipment, not all of them are exactly the same. We don't have, for example, 20 identical trucks with the same capacity. Can we have 5 with one type, 10 with another, 3 with another, and 2 with another? They all work, but the planning will be much smarter if you know and manage skill. The multi-resource that appears is another type of resource, resource type resource, manpower, equipment. I don't have the boat or I don't have the boat 1, I have a kit, a set, same material. I have a set, I have a truck, retro, 5 assemblers, 10 helpers, forming a multiple resource, forming a team. Only if I allocate this team the work will only happen if everyone is available. So it's a kind of resource that I apply, I locate, and everything comes automatically without me having to keep multiplying tables and quantities, or setting up a team all the time, since I already have the team. Remembering the composite resource, which the book doesn't specifically address, if I have inside my multi-resource, not boat 1 or boat 2, but if I have a skill, the modeling system is much more complete and richer. Another type of resource of the resource, equipment and labor, is the resource cost periods, because also the resources can have different costs at different times and re-establishing the costs later, increasing or decreasing. This is a type of feature that, when working with ordinary sets, ensures a more complex modeling. And, of course, better results for managing such diversified resources. Overtime. Overtime would be the overtime type. There are several extra cost tables depending on the time it is used. Not working hours, but extra cost models, for use outside of some hours or within some specific period. It is a type of resource that, associated with the ordinary resource, guarantees a real modeling, traditionally used with a much stronger and safer mathematical support and precision. Another resource-like resource center, which is the same thing as the budget centers, material center. The resource centers group the resources by equipment, labor, hired labor, you classify, and of course this is of interest to a totalization, a leveling view, without the need to copy. Data and take it to Excel. And finally, as an extraordinary resource, different type, is resource production. One thing is the cost in a given time, an amount to be paid for a given time. Another thing is that at a certain point the production changes. In the winter, the production is lower than in the summer, and so on. We can do the modeling by the resource production type. So the extraordinary presented types are either they are in themselves a great resource or they help the ordinary resources to be more efficient, interesting, and real in the real world. The composition between the types of resources was not addressed in the book, but perhaps in a second edition it is worth talking about it. Finally, it was raised during our work of discussions, after the group, that I have already called also a fourth type of resource, which is not in the books of the copy of the copy of the copy, which is not in the sacred manuals that we have had for years or decades. We have the resource of manpower and equipment, we have the resource of materials, we have the resource of funds, but today we have a fourth type of resource. And I could say that this feature is a permission, authorization type feature. And we have a way to document that, but I don't think it's time yet. So I didn't put it in this post. It has already been used in large-scale works, it has already been used in medium-sized works, it has already been used to justify methodologies that I developed for liquid planning, but it is not yet native to the tool. It is necessary, but it is modelable. At least in the Spider project it is possible to do it. So for me to perform an activity, I have to have resources, and I said resources are those elements that we have mastery to provide and allow the activity to happen. If I don't give people an equipment, because it's in my domain, only I can give it, then the activity doesn't happen. If I don't provide materials for activity, then the activity doesn't happen. If I don't give funds to pay for the resources I mentioned and some other expenses of the activity may not happen. Now, the fourth resource is permission, authorization. If I don't give or have the authorization feature, the activity can't happen. We concluded the book launch by saying, without people, equipment, I don't get the project moving. The tools we have on the market allow for this. It is the ordinary resource, the resource. If I don't have it, if I don't provide materials, the activity can't be produced. It's about my mastery of materials. The tools all understood this and placed materials as ordinary modeling resources. On the other hand, the money, which is a necessity for the activity to develop, not to pay for other resources, but, eventually, to subsidize some legal bureaucratic condition, Primavera did not present this as a natural resource. So, it seems that it is not normal for projects, works and enterprises to need the allocated funds. Now, this is not talked about and there is no prospect of recourse permission, resource authorization. Remembering that if I do not provide authorization, the activity cannot or should not happen. Without money and without authorization, the activity should not take place. Without material and human resources, the activity cannot take place. The book launch was then closed in 1 hour and 10 minutes, leaving 20 minutes for us to talk. The conversation cannot be reproduced here. So in the comments of this video there are any guidelines for the inquisition of the book. Happy reading.